Myst, Might, Mayhem. By Han Jung-Wheolya. Chapter 309. Reunion. Part 4. Killing intent. It is an energy that becomes stronger the more one's desire to kill something becomes uncontrollably intense. Emotions belong to the realm of the mind. Among the many emotions, the desire to kill possesses the most intense and volatile will. Therefore, it stimulates not only the five senses of others but also their sixth sense, making them vigilant. Just like now. Whoosh! What killing intent is this strong? My lord? This killing intent was so intense that it made not only the masked enemies but also allies like Sib Chun, Mong Muyak, and Ma Ari Hyen shudder for a moment. The killing intent was so strong that their hair stood on end, and their true energy in the Danjian boiled up on its own due to vigilance. Who the hell is this bastard? The head of the Guyong family, Guyong Sao, who had assumed the stance of his unique technique, the toad poison skill, stared at Mok Jiangnan with startled eyes. At first, he thought he was a master who had reached the peak of the transcendent realm with a tolerance to poison. However, to intimidate the crowd and instill unease with just killing intent, one had to surpass the wall. But surpassing the wall was the same for both sides. Even he, who had surpassed the wall, couldn't take his eyes off the fellow's killing intent and was in a state of tension. What the hell is that fellow's identity? It definitely couldn't be considered the realm of the late-stage warriors. If it was to this extent, it could rather be the 8 stars, the top masters of the martial arts world. Swish! No way? Guyong Sao's eyes widened. He had not taken his eyes off the fellow at all, but at some point, Mok Jiangnan appeared right in front of him. At this, he was momentarily startled, but since he had already finished circulating his energy, he didn't hesitate and immediately tried to launch the double palm strike of the toad poison skill. Thud. Ugh. However, in that instant, Mok Jiangnan's knee kicked up Guyong Sao's chin. Guyong Sao's body floated upwards after being hit on the chin. In that state, Mok Jiangnan consecutively kicked his chest. Thud. Bang. Along with it, the falling raindrops spread out, creating wave-like ripples, and Guyong Sao's body was sent flying backward. Crash. Guyong Sao's flying body crashed through the wall of the branch building. At this sight, the masked individuals couldn't hide their perplexity. The 8 poison snake staff Guyong Sao was a master of poison techniques on par with the 1000 poison Han Tang In Hei, one of the 8 stars. A top master ranked among the best in the martial arts world was subdued in just 2 exchanges by an unknown late-stage warriors whose name was not even known. What the hell was going on? Smack. Then, the bamboo hat-wearing man took off the bamboo raincoat he was wearing. At his waist, beneath the removed bamboo raincoat, was a black sword that appeared to be charred black. The bamboo hat-wearing man even took off the bamboo hat he was wearing. Then, the face that was hidden was revealed, and it was a middle-aged man with a scar above his left eyebrow. Swish! His face was wet from the pouring rain, but how could one forget that face? The corners of Mok Jiangnan's mouth rose. It was indeed that bastard. Before learning martial arts, he was called the sickle-slaying demon and had tracked their traces. At that time, he had encountered that bastard. You should have lived quietly. Why did you go around making a fuss and hasten your fate? Sting. The left side of his chest, where he had been stabbed by that bastard, throbbed. Meanwhile, someone shouted. Left Guardian? It was none other than Sib Chun. At Sib Chun's exclamation, Mong Muyak also recognized him and spoke with a perplexed expression. Why is the society leader's left guardian here? Sib Chun was the 3rd guardian commander of the headquarters. Since he was stationed at the headquarters at all times, he couldn't help but know the faces of the guardians who were close to the society leader. That person was the left guardian named Li Guang. Left guardian. What are you doing? At Sib Chun's shout, the middle-aged man with the scar, no, the one named Li Guang, drew the charred-looking black sword from his waist with an annoyed expression. Mok Jiangnan, who had not taken his eyes off him, opened his mouth. You said he was the society leader's left guardian? Why yes. But why is the left guardian to us? Siap Chun couldn't finish his words. Upon learning that the identity of the one who seemed to be the leader of the masked individuals was the left guardian, the thought that the mastermind who ordered their deaths could be the society leader himself came to mind. Mong Muyak seemed to have a similar suspicion as Siap Chun, and he was equally perplexed. The society leader sent him? Then, since we have completed the secret mission, is he trying to discard us? Why? It was incomprehensible. He was the son of the vice leader, and wasn't Mok Jiangan raised as the disciple of the Shadow Clan master and even a candidate for the fourth disciple? But even if it was a mission that he didn't want others to know about, something seemed strange. Is this really the society leader's order? As he was puzzled, the middle-aged man with the scar, Li Guang, looked at Mok Jiangan and opened his mouth. Your killing intent is directed solely at me. Do you know me? At his question, Mok Jiangan twitched his lips and spoke. Of course. How could I not know? I've been eagerly waiting to meet you. You've been waiting to meet me? You bastard. The middle-aged man with the scar, Li Guang, frowned. Because of what the fellow said, he was reminded of someone, but he heard that bastard had definitely lost his life in an accident during the selection process for the embroidered uniform guards. Then, it couldn't be that bastard, so who the hell is he? No. It can't be that bastard. In the first place, it couldn't be that bastard because no matter how much one's martial arts improved in such a short time, there was a limit. He had seen it firsthand when the society leader tested him. It hadn't even been a month since then. No matter how outstanding one's natural talent was, no, even if one encountered a fortuitous encounter, there was a limit to how strong one could become. Therefore, he was really curious about the identity of this person, but I've always wanted to ask. Step. Mok Jiangan walked towards him and spoke meaningfully. Are you Ghost Blade? As soon as Mok Jiangan's question was asked, the surroundings stirred. Even though only the words Ghost Blade were mentioned, the reaction of the masked individuals was as astonished as when they saw the mark. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man with the scar, Li Guang, who had raised his eyebrows at Mok Jiangan's question, opened his mouth. Who are you? Why are you looking for Ghost Blade? Just answer whether you are or not. If you are indeed Ghost Blade, I think I can reduce a lot of the hardships I've had so far. Crack. Swoosh. Before he could even finish his words, a tremendous poisonous energy surged, and everyone's gaze turned towards it. Looking in that direction, a green haze was spreading in all directions, enough to oxidize even the falling raindrops, and it was melting even the intact building. Sizzle. Through the building melting away due to the poisonous energy, a figure could be seen. It was none other than the 8-poison snake staff Guyong Sao. Elder is safe. At this sight, the masked individuals cheered. However, it didn't last long. That's because the poisonous energy he was emitting was on a different level compared to before, and the green haze was spreading rapidly in all directions. As the potent poisonous energy that oxidized the rain and melted the buildings without a trace spread, the startled masked individuals had no choice but to distance themselves from him. Gasp! The poison is rushing towards us. Get back. Don't go near the elder. Swoosh swoosh. Regardless, Guyong Sao paid no heed and walked towards someone, exuding anger. It was none other than Mok Jiangan. I admit it. I let my guard down. Guyong Sao had drawn up to the 8 poisons, the highest realm of poison techniques. Although he had let his guard down, despite drawing up to the 7 poisons, he felt his mind going blank for a moment from the unexpected strike he received from Mok Jiangan. At this, Guyong Sao acknowledged it clearly. This person was not a late-stage warrior but a master whom he had to face with his full power. Then, he needed to go all out in a manner befitting him. Swoosh! At some point, his hair had completely turned green. He could confidently say that the 8 poisons realm was nearly on par with the legendary Myriad Poisons embodiment, the Myriad Poisons pool body, which embodied 10,000 poisons. You are the first one to make me use all 8 poisons since the 1,000 poison hand Tang In He and that person. Swish. Guyong Sao, whose form could only be seen in green due to the green poisonous energy, launched himself towards Mok Jiangun. It was one of the unique techniques of the toad poison skill, the 8 poison melting village. The trajectory of the barrier created by the green poisonous energy targeted the vital acupuncture points on Mok Jiangun's upper body with a tyrannical momentum. Sizzle. The force was so strong that the surroundings were melting away due to the aftereffects of the poisonous energy. This was the danger of poison techniques. No matter how strong a master was, if they directly confronted poison techniques, they could be poisoned by the aftereffects of the poison or have their body melt away by the extreme poison. However, Mok Jiangun was extending his hand towards Guyong Sao's poison technique without dodging at all. "My lord, you need to keep your distance." Siap Chen shouted in alarm at Mok Jiangun's response. With that level of poison technique, even the repelling strong energy might not work. However, an unexpected event occurred. Swoosh swoosh. Mok Jiangun blocked Guyong Sao's unique technique with one hand while standing still. The trajectory of the brilliant green barrier surrounded by potent poisonous energy tried to penetrate Mok Jiangun's hand and inflict damage in any way possible, but, swoosh swoosh. Mok Jiangun blocked it with one hand without moving an inch. At this, Guyong Sao's eyes wavered. Unlike before, he was using his full power to unleash his unique technique. Not only did he draw up to the 8 poisons realm, but he was also attacking with the power of the 10 stars realm, so judging by the surroundings melting away due to the poisonous energy, its power was at its peak. This fellow. What? Guyong Sao was utterly perplexed. He thought that if they continued to exchange blows, no matter how profound one's internal energy was, they would be poisoned by the poisonous energy. However, he hadn't noticed before, but every time his hand clashed with Mok Jiangun's, the latter's hand was flickering with a purple light. This can't be poison? He thought it couldn't be, but it was definitely poison. It wasn't just a level of tolerance to poison, but this fellow had properly mastered poison techniques. Moreover, the poison technique he was using was not a shoddy one, but, wave demon poison scripture? For a master of poison techniques, you recognize it. You? What is your relationship with that old man, the island poison king? Flickering poison king Bek Saha. Although he had not reached the realm of the poison man, the wave demon poison scripture of the Bek family could be considered a peerless poison technique that was not inferior to the Guyong family or the Sichuan Tang family. Is this fellow Bek Saha? It was nearly impossible to possess this level of poison technique mastery unless one was Bek Saha. No, it's questionable whether he is really Bek Saha. As far as he knew, Bek Saha himself had not reached the realm of the poison man, but unlike himself, this fellow was so skilled in poison techniques that he could generate poisonous energy only when clashing in an instant. Swoosh swoosh. Grind. Damn it. Guyong Sao gritted his teeth. He had already unleashed 5 techniques, yet this fellow was blocking his techniques with just one hand without moving a single step. But at that moment, someone charged towards Mok Jiangun with lightning-fast momentum. It was none other than the middle-aged man with the scar, Li Guang. The black sword wielded by Li Guang aimed at the space between Mok Jiangun's eyebrows in a surprise attack. It was an exquisite single strike that even Guyong Sao had not anticipated. However, smack. In an instant, Mok Jiangun caught it precariously with his index and middle fingers. Clang. He caught it? Li Guang was dumbfounded. Meanwhile, Guyong Sao, who was unleashing his unique technique towards Mok Jiangun, shouted in an angry voice. Are you trying to interfere with me? No matter how superior the opponent was, he had his pride as a martial artist. How dare he launch a sneak attack and interfere while they were still in the midst of a confrontation? However, the middle-aged man with the scar, Li Guang, drew up more inner strength into the hand holding the sword and said, now is not the time for that. Regardless of the situation, right now. Look around before you speak. Around? At those words, Guyong Sao suddenly moved his eyes and surveyed his surroundings. He had been solely focused on Mok Jiangun, so he had no room to pay attention to his surroundings. However, an unbelievable sight was unfolding before his eyes. Swish swish. Stab stab. Arg. Ugh. Around them, two swords dyed in black light were flying around as if they were alive, indiscriminately stabbing and penetrating the masked individuals. At this tremendous sight, Guyong Sao couldn't hide his shock, his eyes widening. This is the demonic sword force? Chapter 310. Reunion. Part 5. Level gain a high understanding of energy by peeking at the wall, allowing them to manipulate weapons with true energy. This is called sword control technique or energy sword control technique. Since the sword control technique does not directly grasp the sword, it gains freedom of movement and can unleash more effective sword techniques, enabling attacks over a wider range. However, there is a realm that maximizes this sword control technique, which is the energy sword force. Masters who have surpassed the wall and reached the profound realm have true energy that has reached its pinnacle and has a smooth flow, allowing them to maximize the sword control technique and even generate sword force. This is unbelievable. Guyong Sao, the head of the Guyong family and the 8 poisoned snake staff, couldn't hide his perplexity. Swish swish. Stab stab. Ugh. Arg. The two swords flying around like fish in the air, indiscriminately attacking the masked individuals, were engulfed in a black light. It was unknown why they were dark, but that intensity was undoubtedly sword force. Guyong Sao stared at Mok Jiangun with trembling eyes. How can this be? Only the sword sheaths remained at the fellow's waist. He didn't even realize that while confronting him, Mok Jiangun was operating the energy sword force to attack his subordinates. Swoosh swoosh. A monster. How can such a monstrous fellow? While using the energy sword force like this, he was not only confronting him but also the second realm Li Guang, who had launched a surprise attack, with just one hand without moving a single step. It was as if this fellow alone was simultaneously doing 4 things, and it was no exaggeration to say that he had reached mastery, not just having surpassed the wall. At this, swoosh! Guyong Sao stopped his attack and created a distance of about 6 steps. Then, Guyong Sao shouted at Mok Jiangun. Reveal your identity. Are you perhaps one of the 6 heavens? 6 heavens. They were the transcendent masters of the true Grandmaster level who were considered the pinnacle of the current martial arts world. Having surpassed the wall and reached the profound realm, it was known that no one could confront them one-on-one unless they were the 8 stars right below them or another member of the 6 heavens. Guyong Sao was convinced that Mok Jiangun was one of the 6 heavens wearing a human skin mask. He thought that without being one of them, it was impossible to display such miraculous martial prowess. 6 heavens? Mok Jiangun chuckled. Is a top master who has surpassed the wall mistaking him for the current pinnacle of the martial arts world? He seemed to understand the meaning of those words. It meant that the martial prowess he had attained had reached a level that could instill vigilance and fear in others. At that moment, clench! The middle-aged man with the scar, Li Guang, drew up his inner strength and tried to pull out the black sword blade caught between Mok Jiangun's index and middle fingers. However, tremble. The sword blade only trembled more but didn't budge at all. What kind of inner strength does this fellow have? Realizing that he couldn't pull out the sword, Li Guang released the sword he was holding and directly generated sword force with his sword finger skill. Swish! The sword force he generated tried to pierce through Mok Jiangun's face, but thud! Ugh! Before he could do so, Mok Jiangun's kick struck Li Guang's abdomen, and his body was pushed back nearly 10 steps. Swoosh! Li Guang quickly dissipated the true energy penetrating his internal organs through his feet. Sizzle! As Mok Jiangun's true energy, that is, the energy of death, flowed out through the soles of his feet and came into contact with the rainwater, it oxidized and turned into steam. Li Guang's expression twisted. It was only for a brief moment, but it was a bizarre true energy that dispersed his original true energy. He thought he should avoid direct clashes as much as possible. Meanwhile, Gaiang Sao said to him, "Li Guang, stop for a moment. That person is definitely a true grandmaster of the six heavens." Six heavens? Li Guang frowned. Indeed, if one could simultaneously confront them for a moment while wielding the energy sword force, it was impossible unless they were a true grandmaster level master who had been given the title of the six heavens. At this, Li Guang also clasped his hands together in a salute towards Mok Jiangan and said, "Are you really a senior of the six heavens?" If he was truly one of the six heavens, even if they fought with the determination to perish together, their chances of victory were slim. Therefore, their attitude couldn't help but become cautious. And if he was really one of the six heavens, the organization would also want to recruit him, so it was better to persuade him rather than fight. Stab stab. Ugh. Dodge. Dodge it. However, the two energy sword forces did not stop and continued to kill the masked individuals. Even Mok Jiangan's subordinates, Siap Chun, Mong Muyak, the masked Ma Are Hyan, and the expelled monk Jia Jiamzhong, were guarding the inn where the holy fire priestess was and killing the masked individuals, so their numbers were rapidly decreasing. At this, the middle-aged man with the scar, Li Guang, hurriedly shouted, "Senior, please stop for a moment. We will also stop attacking." "So? Why me?" "We're saying let's talk for a moment." At his words, Mok Jiangan chuckled. Then, swish! With a light gesture of his sword finger skill, the black sword that had fallen to the ground rose and flew towards Li Guang's heart. Oh no! Li Guang hurriedly used his footwork to dodge the sword and caught the flying sword hilt. Smack! Clench! Huh? Swoosh! The true energy infused in the sword control technique was so strong that even though he caught the sword hilt, he was dragged nearly 5 steps by the sword. Li Guang, who had barely grabbed the sword, calmly said to Mok Jiangan, "We understand that you are angry because of what we did. However, this is a misunderstanding. If you hear our proposal, first, tell me whether you are Ghost Blade or not." At Mok Jiangan's question, Li Guang's expression darkened. The individual before him had been speculating since earlier that he was Ghost Blade, but was it because of the rumor that had spread throughout the martial arts world? How much does he know about the organization? Their organization had existed for a long time, but it was thoroughly organized into cells, and when there were people who knew of their existence, they had responded in 2 ways. One was to recruit them into their organization, and the other was to silence them through murder. The dead cannot speak, after all. Stab stab. Li Guang. Gaiang Sao shouted at him. It was because if they didn't hurry, all the masked individuals would end up dead. At this, Li Guang hurriedly said, "I don't know what you know, senior, but I am not Ghost Blade." "A Ghost Blade? You're not?" "That's right. If there is some misunderstanding, please stop for a moment. During the time I explain, the meaningless slaughter." Swish! At that moment, Mok Jiangan moved his sword finger skill. Then, one of the 2 swords that were indiscriminately attacking the masked individuals while unleashing the energy sword force flew over. It was none other than the Evil Commandment sword. As the flying Evil Commandment sword approached, Li Guang hurriedly raised his black sword infused with sword force to block it. Clang clang clang. In an instant, the swords clashed about 5 times. Li Guang's expression as he blocked the sword became strange. The sword was obscured by a ferocious black energy, making it difficult to see clearly, but this sword seemed familiar. I feel like I've seen this sword somewhere. Meanwhile, clang! As Li Guang deflected the sword that was confronting him was sucked into Mok Jiangan's hand. Click! As the sword was sucked in, the black light of the sword force disappeared. With the disappearance of the sword force, the sword blade was clearly revealed. Seeing this, Li Guang's eyes narrowed. That's because the moment he saw the unique pattern engraved on the sword blade, he realized the identity of that sword. Evil. Commandment? It was definitely one of the demonic knight swords, the evil commandment sword. He couldn't fail to recognize it as he had seen it in the training hall of the Heaven and Earth Society's headquarters. The owner of that sword was definitely, he should be dead? Something is strange. He heard that the owner of that sword had lost his life during the selection process for the embroidered uniform guards. This was information that had come through the organization's intelligence network in the Imperial Palace, so there couldn't be any errors. Moreover, that bastard was estimated to be at the pinnacle stage of the transcendent realm. No matter how outstanding one's natural talent was, there was a limit to the development of martial prowess. At this, Li Guang reached a different conclusion. Could it be? Is this person the Northern Sect Blade King? The Six Heavens Northern Sect Blade King Gu Songbak. Come to think of it, he had obtained one piece of incomprehensible information. In the process of abducting the Holy Fire Priestess from the underground prison in the Imperial Palace, the situation had escalated, and even the Northern Sect Blade King Gu Songbak had intervened. However, apart from them escaping in an unexpected way, it was said that the Northern Sect Blade King Gu Songbak suddenly stopped blocking them and returned to the Emperor. Upon hearing this, Li Guang had found it puzzling. For a true Grandmaster level master like the Northern Sect Blade King Gu Songbak, no matter how outstanding they were, there shouldn't have been much difficulty in capturing the late-stage warriors of the Heaven and Earth Society. But why did he suddenly give up and return? The answer to that seemed to have come out now. The Northern Sect Blade King Gu Songbak is a Southern Pacification Commissioner of the Embroidered Uniform Guards. If a cadet died during the selection process for the Embroidered Uniform Guards, there is a high probability that he obtained that demonic sword through the reporting channel. Then, is this a trap set by the Embroidered Uniform Guards of the Imperial Palace? Even if they had planted members of the organization, the capabilities of the Imperial Palace should not be taken lightly. It was said that 2 executives at the second realm level had lost their lives, and they were investigating who was responsible for it, but was it all the work of the Embroidered Uniform Guards? Clench. Li Guang tightly grasped the sword hilt, stared at Mok Jiangan, and spoke in a confident voice. Are you Senior Northern Sect Blade King Gu Songbak? Why do you think so? The owner of that sword died in the medicine hall due to an unfortunate incident during the selection process for the Embroidered Uniform Guards. Oh. I thought I had killed them all, but it seems there were remaining organization members in the Imperial Palace. At Mok Jiangan's words, Li Guang let out a light sigh. It seemed his prediction was correct. When he heard that executives at the second realm level had suddenly lost their lives, he thought it was strange because there were only a few in the Imperial Palace who could kill them. It was indeed the Embroidered Uniform Guards. At his words, Mok Jiangan chuckled. What's with that reaction? It was a reaction closer to a sneer. His reasoning shouldn't be wrong, so why was he showing such a reaction? As he was puzzled, Mok Jiangan said to him. It's disappointing. Even your side doesn't know everything. Step. With those words, Mok Jiangan walked towards him. At this, Li Guang shouted. 32 strategies. Tap. As soon as that shout ended, the surrounding masked individuals suddenly stabbed their own bodies. Then, their energy began to surge rapidly. Li Guang exchanged glances with Gaiong Sao. We have to go. The 32 strategies was a method where organization members below the third realm would overload their original true energy and launch a joint attack to perish together. If that person was the Northern Sect Blade King, he was not someone they could persuade, so they had to buy time like this and escape. But it was at that very moment. Boom! Mok Jiangan stomped his foot strongly on the ground. At that moment, the ground shook, and the raindrops scattered in all directions, creating wave-like ripples that spread over Tianzhong. Then, the masked individuals who were overloading their original true energy trembled and collapsed. Splash! 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 What? What is this? They couldn't hide their perplexity at the sudden strange phenomenon. They had planned to sacrifice them and escape, but what the hell was going on? Swish! At that moment, Mok Jaehyun's figure suddenly disappeared. It seemed like he was moving at an extremely high speed, but it was so fast that they lost track of his footsteps for a moment. Li Guang heightened his energy sensation and rapidly moved his eyes. It was at that very moment. Swish! A blurry shadow appeared in front of him and aimed at his forehead. He tried to block it by tilting his head back, but... Swish! It was a feint. The real attack was... Bang! Ugh! A palm strike that flew towards his abdomen. Li Guang's body was sent flying backward, rolling several times on the muddy ground filled with rainwater. Ugh! Li Guang, who had rolled for a while before stopping, hurriedly tried to regain his posture and get up. However, bleh! He couldn't hold back the urge to vomit due to the energy that had penetrated his internal organs and was scattering. Li Guang, who had vomited everything inside, staggered and finally managed to lift his head, searching for Mok Jaehyun's footsteps. But right in front of him, Mok Jaehyun was standing with his hands behind his back. Seeing his arrogant stance looking down on him, Li Guang gritted his teeth and spoke. Huh. Huh. Northern sect blah. I recognized you at a glance, but you couldn't recognize me at all. At that moment, Li Guang's eyes wavered. Regardless, Mok Jaehyun continued speaking. I even repaid the debt from back then with the same 3 stars inner strength. As soon as those words ended, Mok Jaehyun grabbed his chin and took off the human skin mask he was wearing. Rip! As the human skin mask was removed, revealing his real face, Li Guang's slightly wavering eyes widened as if they would pop out. To him, Mok Jaehyun smiled eerily and said, It's been a long time, hasn't it? Chapter 311. Reunion. Part 6. The memory of that moment vividly resurfaced. An order came down to deal with someone digging into the organization's traces. They said he might be a troublesome expert, having earned the notorious name Sickle-Slaying Demon for cruelly killing people with a sickle. So I made full preparations, but when I actually met him, it was beyond my expectations. I wondered who was snooping around, but to think it was a teenage brat who hasn't even been weaned. He was young. Not even of age. Moreover, contrary to the order from the organization, you bastard. You haven't even learned martial arts. And martial arts? You don't even know what martial arts are? Huh. The brat hadn't even learned martial arts. It was truly fascinating. Assuming he had learned martial arts, I struck his abdomen with the power of 3 stars. This level of attack could make even a supreme expert suffer internal injuries and possibly die, yet this brat without any internal energy endured this pain. Interesting. A brat who hasn't even learned martial arts is still alive after taking a strike from me. Kook, what the hell are you? Stab. Ugh. So I stabbed a sword into his belly. Even if one hasn't learned martial arts, there are those born with innate divine strength. This brat might have been that type of person. In that case, there was no need to keep him alive. Killing you now would save me from future troubles. Skewer. Stab. Coo. Not satisfied with stabbing his abdomen, to make sure, I pulled out the sword and stabbed it into his left chest as well. You should have just lived quietly. Why did you have to act up and hasten your doom? Huh, heck. I tossed the bastard aside like that. There were many eyes watching, and I figured this was enough for him to lose his life, so I left. But how could something like this happen? The moment he took off his human skin mask and smiled, the memory of when I first saw the bastard resurfaced. The sight of him grotesquely laughing while killing people in front of the burning village overlapped. Sickle-Slaying Demon. Li Guang's pupils trembled violently. It was unbelievable, but I had the thought that the bastard might be alive by heavenly luck ever since seeing him at the Heaven and Earth Society. It was because the face was identical. As I tracked his traces, the conviction that the bastard might be alive grew stronger. Among those who had contact with the bastard, no one suspected him based on appearance. But they all said something about him seemed different. especially those who had contact with the Wooden-Eyes swordsman. However, since the bastard lost his life at the Forbidden Guards selection tournament, I thought it was no longer an issue to worry about. No, until just moments ago, I absolutely couldn't connect him to that bastard. This doesn't make sense. This was something that couldn't happen according to common sense. No, it was completely impossible. The bastard hadn't learned martial arts at all. Unlike others, I directly confirmed this myself. But what is going on? It hasn't even been half a year. It was astounding. If he had reached the level of a third-rate or second-rate martial artist, I would have said he had talent despite starting late. This wasn't an issue that could be dismissed with mere talent. Tremble, tremble, tremble. The trembling of his hands intensified. I prided myself on being a senior member in the organization and had faced quite a few monsters. But this existence before my eyes was lacking even to be called a monster. Is it possible to reach the sixth heaven, known as the peak of the martial world, from nothing in less than half a year? Anyone who heard this would find it absurd. This is a dream. For a moment, Li Guang wondered if he was dreaming. Then Mok Jiangnan spoke. We finally meet, but the reaction is different from what I expected. What? Are you not happy to see me? At Mok Jiangnan's words, Li Guang was momentarily at a loss. With such an incomprehensible pace of advancement, he was on the verge of doubting if this bastard was really that bastard. How could he be happy to see him? Putting everything else aside, he was the very person who stabbed a sword into the bastard's heart. In a situation where it was obvious the bastard would see him as an enemy, welcoming him was nonsensical. At that moment. How can this be? Guyong Sao, the 8 Poison sect leader and patriarch of the Guyong clan, also couldn't hide his astonishment. He naturally assumed it would be the 6 Heavens top figure, but when the human skin mask was removed, a face even younger than now, no, not even of age, was revealed. No matter how he looked, he appeared to be only 17 or 18 years old. What was going on? Could it be that this extraordinary person had undergone rebirth or returned to a youthful state? The puzzled Guyong Sao soon asked. Who are you? Who knows? Who could I be? This person seems to know me best. Mok Jiangnan smiled and looked at Li Guang. Then Li Guang spoke with a trembling voice. You bastard. What the hell are you? This is something that absolutely cannot happen. Don't tell me you deliberately pretended to be dead back then? Unable to comprehend Mok Jiangnan's tremendous pace of advancement, Li Guang shifted his thoughts to the idea that he had been practicing martial arts from the beginning. Otherwise, it was hard to accept this. At this, Mok Jiangnan shrugged. How could that be? I really almost died back then. Thanks to you. Swish. With that, he slightly raised his hand. Then the black sword that Li Guang had dropped, looking as if it had been charred, floated up and flew towards his abdomen. Slash. Li Guang tried to take a step back from the rushing sword. But his feet wouldn't move. No matter how unusual the sword was, at this speed, it wasn't impossible to dodge it. However, he was so shocked that his body wouldn't move. As his belly was about to be pierced, whoosh. At that moment, a powerful energy infused with green poison flew in and blocked the black sword. The one who unleashed the poison was, of course, Guyong Sao. Since I owe you, I was going to give you at least one hole in your belly, but you're interfering. Mok Jiangnan clicked his tongue and smacked his lips. At this, Guyong Sao hurriedly shouted. Come to your senses. Are you going to keep being like this? No matter how strong the opponent was, what difference was there between being in a daze and baring one's neck waiting for death? At his shout, Li Guang snapped out of it. Kook. He had lost his fighting spirit for a moment due to the incomprehensible sense of relative deprivation. Coming to his senses, Li Guang circulated his internal energy and instantly raised his martial power to 10 stars. Since he had reached the transformation realm, having surpassed the wall, the speed of his energy circulation was extremely fast. Wung. Using sword fingers to create a sword energy, He assumed a sword-pointing stance and shouted, "Elder! We must attack together." I had the same thought. Swoosh! Judging from Li Guang's reaction that persuasion through words was impossible, although his identity was unknown, Guyang Sao also reawakened his 8 poisons and steeled his resolve. The opponent was a peerless master on par with the 6th heaven realm. Only by attacking together with the determination to fight to the death did they have a sliver of a chance to survive. They exchanged glances, about to seize the initiative, when Mok Jianan lightly waved his hand. Wung. Then the surrounding true energy surged, and the air felt different. Wondering what he had done, Mok Jianan said, "I blocked the sound within a radius of 5 jang using qi." Block the sound? Why would he do that? Waiting for an opportunity to launch a joint attack, they couldn't hide their puzzlement. To them, Mok Jianan said, "I'll give you just one chance." Chance? What the hell are you talking about? A chance for you two to survive. What? At Mok Jianan's words, Li Guang furrowed his brows. What kind of scheme was this? This bastard would consider him, who had stabbed a sword into his abdomen and chest, as an enemy. Moreover, he had revealed his identity as if he had been waiting. Li Guang glanced at the true energy filling the surroundings and the masked individuals fighting outside with Mok Jianan's subordinates. Is this something even his subordinates mustn't hear? Otherwise, there would be no reason to block the sound. Li Guang discreetly glanced at Guyang Sao. Meeting his eyes, Guyang Sao nodded as if to say they should listen for now. No matter how skilled they were in the transformation realm and poison arts, their chances of winning against an expert of the profound realm were extremely low. If there was even a slight room for negotiation, there was no reason to refuse. However, to make it clear, Li Guang said, "I pushed you to the brink of death. And you're giving me a chance?" At these words, Guyang Sao looked at Li Guang with surprised eyes. How did Li Guang push an expert comparable to the 6th heaven to the brink of death? It was incomprehensible. What on earth happened between the two of them? While he was puzzled, Mok Jianan chuckled and said, "If I wanted to kill with that, I would have killed you earlier instead of having this conversation." At Mok Jianan's words, Li Guang bit his lip hard. This bastard had become incomparably stronger than before and was looking down on him. However, he couldn't strongly deny it. If Mok Jianan had properly raised his martial power when he struck his abdomen earlier, it might not have ended with just vomiting. "You seem quite upset. You should have definitely cut off my head back then instead of stabbing my chest." Those words truly made him regret. He was angry at his complacency in thinking the bastard couldn't possibly survive after stabbing his abdomen and heart because he hadn't learned martial arts. However, Li Guang barely suppressed this and said, "You mentioned giving us a chance. What is it?" "It's nothing much. Just answer my questions kindly." "Answer your questions?" At these words, Li Guang and Guyang Sao's expressions darkened. The chance he mentioned seemed to be extracting information from them. Come to think of it, the brat not only knew their organization's emblem but also seemed to know information related to their hierarchy. Handing over information to someone like him meant betrayal. At this, Guyang Sao spoke with a heavy voice, "Are you telling us to betray the organization and hand over information?" "Yes. You understand well. Think of it as betrayal or whatever you want. I just need you to give me the answers I want." With such a demand, did you not consider that we would fight you to the death? As soon as those words ended, "Shudder." Guyang Sao's expression froze. Mok Jianan was smiling eerily while looking at him, and the overwhelming pressure of his murderous intent made it difficult to breathe for a moment. Is this the difference between being separated by a single wall? As his breathing trembled, Mok Jianan said with a smiling face, "You seem to be discarding the chance too easily." "What?" Swish. At that moment, Mok Jianan's figure disappeared. Unable to grasp Mok Jianan's traces with just his senses, Guyang Sao urgently bent his knees and leaped, spinning his poisonous palm strike towards the back with the momentum. Toad Poison Art. 7th stance, resisting tail clam palm. The momentum was like a leaping poisonous toad, enough to make an ordinary person retreat. Smack. However, Mok Jayangan grabbed his right arm, into which his powerful poison energy and momentum were poured, as if snatching it. Then he twisted his wrist in the opposite direction. Crack! The broken bone protruded from the elbow of his twisted arm. Arg! A scream burst from Gayong Sao's mouth. Regardless, Mok Jayangan grabbed his shoulder. At the same time, he tried to pull his broken wrist while twisting it further. Stop. At that moment, a blue sword energy stabbed towards Mok Jayangan's face. It was Li Guang's strike. It was a strong thrust with domineering momentum, but Mok Jayangan didn't dodge at all and lightly extended his left palm. Wung. Clang. No way? Ripples formed, and the stabbing sword energy was deflected by the elastic force. This was the profound principle of the scripture of transferring true qi. The moment his sword energy was deflected, Mok Jayangan tried to pull Gayong Sao's broken wrist again. In an instant, Gayong Sao hurriedly struck Mok Jayangan's chest with his left poisonous palm. Bang! It was a poisonous palm strike with the power of 10 stars, infused with the poison of the 8 poisons. His poisonous palm strike hit squarely, but Mok Jayangan's upper body slightly leaned back, then he straightened his waist again. At that sight, Gayong Sao's face turned pale. Despite being hit by the extremely poisonous 8 poisons palm strike, he acted as if nothing happened. No matter how profound his realm was, wasn't this too monstrous? Crack! At that moment, as if Mok Jayangan was determined to pull out his wrist, he tried to yank it again. Gayong Sao cried out in shock, "I'll talk. I'll say anything, so please stop."